The billionaire's empire, once towering over the skyline, now crumbles like dust in his hands. The handcuffs bite into his wrists as he kneels in the cold, sterile light of the courtroom. His suit, once a symbol of unmatched power, now looks like a shroud around him. The floor beneath him, a reflection of the empire he built, seems to mock him, unyielding, cold. In the distance, a child watches him from across the room, eyes wide, unblinking. He could not save her. He built an empire, crushed countless others beneath his ambition, but when it mattered most, when the one person who mattered most needed him, he was powerless. His chest tightens, the weight of guilt pressing down on him harder than any sentence could. His empire is gone, his future a blur. But what hurts most is the child, the one who will now have to grow up without the man who once seemed invincible. His heart falters, a cold sweat breaking on his forehead. The sound of the gavel echoes in the courtroom, a sound he will never forget. He built an empire, but he couldn't save her. Not from the mess he created, not from the world he had ruled with so much pride and greed. He failed her. And now, the child watches the man who destroyed everything, his empire, his legacy, and perhaps most painfully, the one thing that could have redeemed him. His family. She wasn't ready. No one ever truly is. The sound of the gavel still rings in her ears as she watches the final pieces of her father's legacy slip away. The boardroom doors close behind her, but it's as if they've shut off the entire world. Outside, the skyline gleams with golden ambition, a city she was once destined to conquer. But now, she's an outsider watching her own empire die. Her father's name, once whispered in reverence, now becomes a curse on her lips. The streets below teem with people, their lives unfolding without her. She thought she could escape. She thought she could walk away, leave the weight of his decisions behind. But the power, the wealth, the influence, it pulls at her like gravity. She wanted to be different, to be free of the expectations he placed on her shoulders. But as the world spins on, she realizes the price of escaping it all is the very thing she had hoped to find: peace. She stands at the window, her reflection merging with the city outside, and in that fleeting moment, she feels the undeniable weight of the empire still tied to her. She doesn't want it. She never did. But she can't let it go. Her fingers hover over the keyboard, the cursor blinking at her. She's not typing anything, just staring. The silence is deafening. The weight of the decision before her bears down on her, an insurmountable wall she's never been able to scale. The emails have piled up. The projects need attention. The board is waiting for answers. Yet, her mind is elsewhere, lost in the shadows of her father's legacy. The company, the empire, everything she's worked for, was it all just a game? She remembers the days before the power, when she was just a little girl, watching her father from the sidelines. He seemed invincible back then, larger than life. But now she sees the cracks in the facade. The loneliness, the constant fear of losing it all. He passed that fear on to her. And now, it's all she knows. But fear is a cage, and she's ready to break out. She promised herself she wouldn't be him, wouldn't fall into the same trap. But the power keeps pulling her back, forcing her to make choices she can't ignore. She stands up, closes her laptop, and stares at the reflection in the window, unsure whether she is seeing herself or the ghost of her father. She walks down the corridor of her father's once thriving empire. The walls, lined with accolades and awards, seem to mock her. They all tell a story of success, but the weight of them now feels like a tombstone, cold and unyielding. Every step echoes in the hollow silence, a reminder of everything she's lost. Her father's office door is slightly ajar, the familiar scent of leather and cigars still lingering in the air. She pauses. For a moment, she wonders what it would be like to walk in there to take his place. Thought is fleeting, but it stirs something within her. She could never fill those shoes, and yet the pressure of the legacy continues to weigh on her shoulders. As she looks around, she sees the traces of her father in everything: his chair, the worn leather bookshelves, the old photographs on the walls. She used to think she could escape it all, but it's clear now. This world will never let her go. She's trapped by her inheritance, shackled to a past she didn't choose, and she's not sure how to break free. She slumps into her father's old chair, its worn leather creaking under her weight. Her hands trace the armrests, the familiar contours that once held him as he worked late into the night. The chair feels foreign now, as if she doesn't belong here, yet it's the only thing that still feels like home. The city lights below flicker as night falls, but here in this office, time seems to stand still. She wants to scream, to let out all the frustration that's been building inside her since the gavel fell. But she can't. Instead, she lets the silence settle around her, her thoughts racing. The power, the legacy, the expectations. None of it was ever what she wanted. She wanted something more. She thought she could forge her own path. But now, she realizes that the road ahead is already paved. It was always paved. She was never meant to be free. Her father's empire was never hers to control. She closes her eyes, taking a deep breath, and when she opens them again, she knows what she has to do. She can't run anymore. She grew up in the shadow of a man whose presence loomed larger than life. Her earliest memories are filled with quiet dinners, where her father's eyes never met hers. She watched him fail to be present, fail to be the hero she needed. Promises whispered in the dark. I'll be different, I won't be like him. Those words, a vow carved deep in her heart, fueled her every step. She saw the cost of his ambition, broken relationships, endless battles, a family fractured by greed. And in that pain she found her fire. She was determined to write a different story. To be a leader defined not by wealth or power, but by compassion and resilience. Yet beneath her steely resolve lay the wounds no one saw, the shame of inheritance, the love tangled with disappointment, the fear that history might repeat itself. Each day, she wrestled with those ghosts, carrying them into every boardroom, every decision. She was no longer a child, but the echoes of her past followed her, a constant reminder of who she was running from and what she was becoming. As a young woman, she faced rejection, not just from the world, but from her own boardroom. Doors that should have opened for her slammed shut as whispers filled the air. Is she ready? Does she deserve it? She was overlooked, doubted, dismissed. Yet each rejection hardened her resolve. She studied harder, worked longer, outperformed every expectation. But success came with a price. Isolation. Friends drifted away, lovers left, tired of waiting for her to return from the endless grind. She became a ghost in her own life, present but invisible, defined by her work rather than who she was. Her mother's worried calls and her own silent tears in the dark were evidence of the toll it took. She wanted more than just power, she craved belonging. But the higher she climbed, the lonelier the view became. And still, she promised herself, she would never let the pain of her past dictate her future. She would rise, alone if she had to. In a small corner store, a boy sat quietly on the floor, his tiny hands clutching a worn toy car. His mother pleaded at the counter, her voice trembling as she begged for a job. Any job. The harsh fluorescent lights flickered above them, casting long shadows over their faces. Their poverty was invisible to the bustling world outside, but it was a weight they carried every day. She saw herself in that boy. Years earlier, trapped in similar struggles, watching her own mother fight for scraps. That pain, that hunger for a better life, was a fire burning in her soul. It was the reason she fought so hard, the reason she refused to let the past define her. But even with all her ambition, she could not erase the scars of those early days. They shaped her, grounded her, reminded her that power meant nothing without purpose. And as she watched the boy clutch his toy, she made a silent promise, to break the cycle, no matter the cost. She carried shame like a hidden weight, refusing to let anyone see the cracks beneath her polished exterior. Every board meeting was a battlefield, every decision a test of her worth. The love she held for her family was tangled with resentment, for the legacy they left her and the sacrifices she had to make. Fear gnawed at her edges, the fear of becoming what she vowed never to be, broken, powerless. Yet, that fear also sparked her fire. She threw herself into the work, building walls around her heart to protect what little vulnerability remained. But walls, no matter how strong, can be breached. And beneath the armor, the girl who watched her father fail still whispered in the dark. She was learning, slowly, painfully, that the power she craved was more than money or titles. It was the strength to face herself and the ghosts of her past. And only then could she begin to truly lead. Love and fire, these were the forces that drove her forward and threatened to consume her. Every win tasted bittersweet, shadowed by the sacrifices she made. Friendships fractured under the strain of her relentless pursuit. Nights spent alone became her norm. The loneliness was a constant companion, yet it was in those moments of quiet despair that she found clarity. She realized the fire inside her was not just ambition, but a fierce desire to rewrite the story, to transform the pain of her past into a legacy of strength and hope. The scars she carried were not weaknesses but battle marks, and with every breath she vowed to harness both love and fire, not as enemies, but as allies in the war for her future. This was her journey, not just to power, but to herself. The journey began with restless nights and pounding ambition. She poured every ounce of energy into the company, launching new projects, forging partnerships, and breaking barriers. The thrill of early victories fueled her relentless pace, but success demanded sacrifices. Birthdays passed unnoticed, friends drifted away, and moments with loved ones became distant memories. She stood alone in glass towers, staring at the horizon, wondering if the price was worth paying. The lines between work and life blurred as her body grew weary, but her resolve sharpened. Each sleepless night was a battle fought in silence. Yet every challenge conquered was a reminder that she was rising. Though the higher she climbed, the colder the air became. The glow of success was bright, but it cast long, isolating shadows. Her world was shrinking, defined by power and loneliness, a paradox she lived daily. The cost was high, but retreat was never an option. She launched a risky new venture, a bold bet that could make or break her career. The sleepless nights multiplied as she balanced spreadsheets, negotiated deals, and managed crises. The pressure was unrelenting. She missed dinners, anniversaries, and late-night conversations. The people who once stood by her began to disappear, replaced by empty chairs and unanswered texts. Yet in every loss she found a lesson, and in every challenge a renewed sense of purpose. She learned that leadership was more than strategy. It was endurance, sacrifice, and unshakable grit. With every setback, she steeled herself to push harder, knowing the stakes were higher than ever. The victories were sweet, but came tinged with loneliness. The climb continued, and the price kept rising. Friends and lovers became casualties of her ambition. Invitations went unanswered, calls unanswered. The cost was more than time, it was connection. She felt the sting of absence at every milestone, a quiet ache in the spaces where warmth used to be. The weight of her choices pressed on her, but she could not stop. Every sacrifice was a step toward the legacy she was determined to build. She reminded herself that greatness required solitude, that pain was the price of power. Yet beneath her armor, a fragile longing remained, for companionship, for understanding, for moments of peace. But those moments were fleeting, replaced by endless meetings and negotiations. The fire inside burned brighter than ever, consuming the person she once was, and forging a new identity born of resolve and loss. Amidst the chaos of growth, she felt moments of triumph that felt hollow. A deal closed, a competitor bested, a new market conquered, yet the celebrations were muted, the joy fleeting. Success had become a double-edged sword. The empire she built was a fortress, but it was also a cage. She wondered if the victories were hers, or just echoes of her father's ambition. Every win was shadowed by the fear of loss, every smile by the loneliness behind it. She fought the gnawing question, was it worth it? The sleepless nights, the lost connections, the endless pressure. Yet she pushed on, fueled by a vision only she could see, determined to rewrite the legacy on her own terms. The cost was rising, but so was she. Stronger, sharper, unstoppable. The climb came with undeniable growth, but it demanded sacrifice beyond measure. She shed pieces of herself, lost friendships, fractured family ties, and nights spent battling exhaustion alone. The relentless drive reshaped her, honing her into a force few could challenge. Yet beneath the armor of success lay quiet wounds. The victories were bittersweet trophies that came with a cost she sometimes questioned. But retreat was not an option. Her journey was a crucible, forging strength from pain and resilience from loss. She stood at the edge of a new frontier, scarred but unbroken, ready to face whatever came next. The price was steep, but the rise was hers, and hers alone. The foundation of her empire began to crumble beneath her feet, shattering everything she believed in. The discovery was devastating. Her closest ally, her mentor, the one she trusted above all, had been siphoning funds, betraying her in the quiet shadows. The truth hit like a tidal wave, washing away years of loyalty and hard work. Her heart pounded as she realized how deep the betrayal went. This was not just business, it was personal. Every late night, every sacrifice, every trust placed in him now felt like a mistake. The empire she built was built on fractured trust, fragile and flawed. As she stared at the documents that exposed the theft, the walls she had painstakingly built began to collapse. It wasn't just the money. It was the loss of faith, the unraveling of everything she fought for. The weight of it crushed her, leaving a hollow ache deep inside. The floor beneath her shook, and she feared she might fall with it. The betrayal didn't end there. As she dug deeper, the truth about her family emerged. Her co-founder was not a stranger, but her own sibling. The realization stunned her into silence. Their relationship had been a delicate dance of rivalry and loyalty, but now it was a battlefield marked by deception. She felt the sting of every hidden agenda, every secret kept behind closed doors. The family she thought she understood was a maze of lies and power struggles. The sibling she trusted was playing a game she never fully knew. This revelation shattered her world, forcing her to question everything. Her past, her motivations, and the future she was fighting for. The boardroom, once a place of control, became a cage of doubt. She was alone in a war she didn't choose, caught between love and betrayal. Amid the storm, a more harrowing truth emerged. Her health was failing, quietly and relentlessly. A diagnosis she kept hidden, afraid to show weakness to her team or family. The disease crept in unnoticed, a shadow that threatened to undo everything. She was dying, and the knowledge crushed her with unbearable weight. Every breath became a reminder of time slipping away, every moment a fragile thread holding her together. The burden of leadership grew heavier as her body betrayed her. She could not tell them. Her team relied on her strength, her family on her resilience. The secret became a prison, isolating her in silent suffering. The fight was no longer just for the company, but for her very survival. And as the darkness closed in, she wondered if she could face the end with the same courage she showed the world. The company was no longer hers alone. The ground shifted beneath her as she realized the empire was built on shifting alliances and stolen dreams. Every partner she thought was loyal had their own agenda. The walls of trust crumbled, and the people she relied on revealed hidden faces. The weight of deception was suffocating. She faced endless questions without answers, battles without clear enemies. The empire's foundation was rotten, and the more she uncovered, the more fragile everything became. Fear gripped her, not just for the company, but for the family she tried to protect. The whispers of betrayal echoed louder each day, and she stood alone, wrestling with the ruin of her world, and the ghosts of promises broken. The floor dropped out beneath her just when she thought she could hold on. The perfect facade shattered, leaving a raw, exposed truth. She was broken, betrayed, and vulnerable beyond repair. The empire, the legacy, the life she fought to build, it all felt like slipping sand. But in the silence that followed the collapse, something shifted inside her. The woman who had been crushed beneath the weight of lies found a flicker of fierce resolve. She would not be undone. The loss was unbearable, but it was not the end. She gathered the shards of her broken world and prepared to fight not just for survival, but for redemption. This was no longer about power. It was about reclaiming herself from the ashes of betrayal. The boardroom was charged with tension as the decisive vote approached. Each face around the table carried the weight of the future, some with hope, others with doubt. She stood at the center, her heart pounding, knowing this moment could unravel everything or forge a new path. Her voice was steady, but laced with raw emotion as she addressed the room. This was more than a business decision. It was a reckoning. Every sacrifice, every battle, led to this turning point. The legacy she inherited was fragile, fractured by betrayal and loss, but in this moment she demanded a chance to rebuild it anew. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence louder than words. As the votes were cast, she saw the outcome reflected in the faces of those she trusted, and those she didn't. The empire hung in the balance, and with one final breath she steeled herself for the consequences. An apology hung in the air, raw and overdue. She spoke with quiet power, acknowledging the mistakes, the betrayals, the wounds inflicted along the way. The words were heavy but sincere, a plea for forgiveness that went beyond the boardroom. It was an apology to herself, to the family she tried to protect, and to the legacy she hoped to salvage. Her voice cracked at times, revealing the vulnerability beneath her armor. The room listened, some with empathy, others with guarded skepticism. This moment was a turning point, not just for the company, but for the woman who had carried the weight of it all. She didn't know if it was enough, but it was honest. And in honesty, she found a flicker of hope. The final speech was a culmination of years of struggle and sacrifice. She stood tall, commanding the room with a voice both fierce and tender. This was her moment to make or break the empire, not through power alone, but through truth. She spoke of legacy, redemption, and the hope that even shattered empires could rise again. Every word carried the weight of her journey, the losses endured, the battles won and lost, and the love that had never faded. As she spoke, the boardroom shifted, the skepticism softened, the cold walls seemed to warm. It was not just a speech. It was a declaration of intent, a promise to fight, not just for the company, but for the soul of what it represented. The empire was no longer a fortress of isolation, but a beacon of resilience. In the quiet aftermath of the vote, a silent embrace spoke volumes. She and her father, once estranged by ambition and pain, found a moment of fragile reconciliation. Words were unnecessary. Their shared history and the weight of everything lost hung between them. It was a fleeting hug, a balm for old wounds, a bridge over years of silence. Outside, the world continued in relentless motion, but here, in this small moment, time slowed. The legacy was no longer just about business, but about family, forgiveness, and the hope of healing. They stood together, not as CEO and heir, but as father and daughter, bound by love that survived even the deepest fractures. The decision was irreversible. The board had spoken, and the empire would either rise anew or fall into shadow. The weight of the moment pressed on her like a physical force, a culmination of every battle fought and every tear shed. Yet beneath the exhaustion was a fierce clarity. This was her moment of truth, the peak of her journey. Whatever the outcome, she would face it head-on, with every ounce of strength left. The legacy she claimed was no longer about perfection, but resilience, sacrifice, and hope. The empire might tremble, but it would not fall, not while she still stood. This was the summit, the turning point where everything changed. And she was ready. The aftermath was quieter than she imagined. No roaring crowds, no triumphant cheers. Instead, there was a solemn stillness as she faced what had truly been gained and lost. The company survived, but the cost was etched deep into every corner of her life. She had saved the empire, yes, but at the price of fractured relationships and moments forever missed. The power she once chased now felt hollow, replaced by a different kind of strength, the courage to face herself. Her father, distant yet present, had sacrificed much to protect what she could not. The legacy was no longer about conquest, but about sacrifice, love, and the quiet redemption found in the spaces between victory and loss. She stood in the ruins of what was, and the hope of what could be, breathing deeply, learning to live with the scars and the light. The daughter gave up more than power, she gave up the illusion of control. She stepped away from the boardroom battles and market wars to find herself in quieter places, small moments of peace and clarity. The identity she sought was not found in titles or triumphs, but in letting go. It was a painful surrender, yet deeply freeing. The legacy she left behind was no longer one of dominance, but of resilience and grace. In giving up the throne, she gained something far more valuable, the chance to rebuild on her own terms, to reclaim her story beyond the shadows of the past. The journey inward was difficult but necessary, and with each step, she found new strength to embrace the unknown. Her father's presence lingered, a quiet shadow, and a source of strength. Though he had missed so much, his sacrifices had saved the company from collapse. They were two halves of a fractured legacy, each carrying burdens the other could not fully understand. In his silence, there was regret. In her resolve, forgiveness. The empire they left behind was no longer a monument to genius or greed, but a testament to endurance and sacrifice. Their story was not one of perfection, but of humanity, the messy, painful, and beautiful truth of family and legacy intertwined. She carried his mistakes and his hopes forward, a torch passed between generations. The legacy was never built on brilliance alone, but on sacrifice and resilience. The battles fought in boardrooms and hospitals had reshaped them both, father and daughter, entwined by blood and struggle. She realized that true power was not in domination, but in the willingness to endure pain, forgive failures, and keep moving forward. The empire was theirs to rebuild, not as a monument to the past, but as a foundation for the future. In letting go of perfection, they found strength. In embracing their flaws, they found freedom. The story continued, not with grand gestures, but with quiet courage and relentless hope. In the end, the story was not about wealth or titles, but about what they became. The scars they bore were proof of battles survived, not just lost. The daughter found peace in giving up the chase. The father found redemption in sacrifice. The empire lived on, not as a monument to genius, but as a testament to love, loss, and survival. They learned that legacy is not what you build alone, but what you leave in the hearts of those who follow. And in that, they found a kind of immortality, quiet but enduring, like a flame that never truly dies. The company doors closed behind him, but his shadow never left. He walked away from the empire, a man stripped of power, but not of purpose. The city's hum faded as he retreated into silence, the weight of his choices etched into every step. His reflection in the glass mirrored a man transformed, not broken, but humble. He had lost a legacy, yet held on to a single unyielding truth. Though he left the company, he never left her. The bond between them was invisible but unbreakable, a tether that defied distance and time. In the quiet spaces of absence, that connection grew stronger, a silent promise carried through years of regret and hope. The empire was hers now, but his love was eternal, a constant beneath the shifting tides of fortune. She stood in the empty boardroom, the silence a stark contrast to the years of battles fought within these walls. Her gaze lifted to the vacant chair where her father once sat, a symbol of power, loss, and legacy. Her hand reached out, trembling slightly, as if trying to touch the past and the future at once. This was more than a throne, it was a reminder of everything they had endured, and everything still to come. The chair was empty, but the promise it held was full of possibility. The empire was hers to rebuild, to redefine, not just with strategy, but with heart. The weight of history pressed down, but also lifted her up. In that moment, she understood that true power was not possession, but purpose. A child's hand reached up, small and eager, towards the same boardroom chair that had once seemed so distant and untouchable. The future, fragile and full of hope, stretched before her like an unwritten page. The girl's eyes sparkled with curiosity and determination, unaware of the burdens that came with legacy. Yet in that innocent gesture was a silent vow, a promise to face whatever came next with courage and grace. The past was a story told in whispers and lessons, but the future belonged to those who dared to dream beyond the walls built by their predecessors. The chair was not just a symbol of power, but of possibility. The next chapter was hers to write. The mirror reflected a woman changed by fire and trial. She stared silently at her own eyes, eyes that had seen loss, betrayal, and the slow rebuilding of hope. Behind her, fireworks erupted, painting the night sky in brilliant bursts of color. The celebration outside contrasted with the quiet inside, where a fierce resolve burned steadily. She was no longer just an heir to an empire, but a woman who had reclaimed herself. The past was a shadow behind her, and the future was alive with possibility. In that silent moment, she understood that power was more than titles. It was the courage to stand, to face, and to rise again. The fireworks faded, but her spirit would not. He left the company, but never left her. The bond between father and daughter transcended boardrooms and battles, woven through years of pain and hope. The empire they built was not just bricks and mortar, but the legacy of love, sacrifice, and the unbreakable ties of family. As the child's hand touched the empty chair, the story came full circle, a silent testament to resilience and renewal. The future was theirs to shape, fragile, but filled with promise. The last sparks of the night sky faded, leaving a stillness that whispered of new beginnings. And in that quiet the legacy lived on, stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever came next.